It's the 1950s. World War II recently ended, veterans just came home. America is now experiencing a baby boom with the average family having 3 children, and automobiles are becoming a commonality rather than a luxury. America is now going through some major changes, but one of the most radical changes of all was the 180 that American urban planning did during this time period. A few years after World War II, the American economy was booming. Around 60% of Americans lived in urban areas, being attracted by lucrative job markets. However, there were some drawbacks to the city life. Cities were congested, and large living space was very hard to come by. A new form of settlement needed to be created to accommodate the millions of new families of the returning war veterans. A real estate developer named William Levitt saw this as an opportunity to create a new and unique type of housing that would solve many of the problems that families face living in the cities. Levitt had the idea of building new communities far from the cities that would only be accessible to the cities by car. Car ownership was becoming more common in the United States, so he did not see the long distance from the cities as something that would be prohibitive. So, in 1951, Levitt bought some farmland in Long Island, New York, to build his first community, which he creatively named Levittown. He used the military model of mass producing housing for soldiers to build hundreds of new homes in his community. These homes were fairly large, offered privacy, and most importantly, they were affordable. They costed between $7,000 and $10,000, which was a price most Americans could afford. It was also possible to pay as little as 5% down payment for these homes, and veterans were exempt from paying any down payment.
Well, here's the home that cost its happy owners just $9,000. And that includes such extras as a completely equipped kitchen, a two-way fireplace, a finished room in the attic, and even a washing machine.
These homes were very popular with young Americans planning to start new families while also working in the city. Seeing the success of the first Levittown, William Levitt built multiple new Levittowns all across the country. The Levittowns were considered the prototype of the American suburb. Later in the 1950s and 60s, thousands of new suburbs were built on similar models to the Levittowns. Millions of Americans ditched life in the cities to live a more comfortable life in the suburbs. The expansion of the suburbs saw a new phenomenon called urban sprawl, which is when areas tied to urban areas like the suburbs started rapidly expanding into rural areas. Urban sprawl continues happening today. However, there were always people, even when the phenomenon first appeared, that were against uncontrolled urban sprawl and campaigned for it to be controlled.
And the builders moved farther and farther out in search of good development land, bypassed expensive or difficult terrain, leaving undeveloped islands behind them. Wherever the new subdivisions went, they created problems for the unprepared communities of the new suburbia. More taxes for more and more schools, roads, sewer and water lines, more of everything to service the swelling population. The hard-pressed communities, finding themselves in a new environment of metropolitanization, looked for a remedy in their only weapon: control of the land through zoning and subdivision ordinances.
Urban sprawl created many problems with the environment. The local ecosystems in places where suburbs expanded to were highly damaged. Low-density single-use areas of settlement take up a lot of space. Since suburbs were only connected to the city and other areas like shopping centers and schools by car, way more Americans were driving, which meant an increase in emissions. Nonetheless, suburbs were and still are romanticized in American culture. Part of living the American dream is living in a nice big house with your big family in the suburbs and commuting to work every day in your car. Many people see suburbs resembling something like this as the pinnacle of success in America. However, There are more unfortunate realities that existed and still exist with the suburbs. Suburbs in America were extensively used as a political tool to enforce segregation. William Levitt and other major real estate developers in the 1950s and 60s did not allow non-white people to buy homes in their suburbs. This segregation done by real estate developers was actively supported by the federal government because of discriminatory redlining policies that were practiced in the United States at the time. Even non-white veterans who recently came home and wanted to start families could not move into the suburbs. As white people moved out of the cities into the suburbs and minorities stayed there, minority areas did not receive certain services that white areas received due to redlining, which is the practice of withholding certain services from areas based on their racial demographics. Part of the appeal of moving to the suburbs for a large number of white people was a desire to live amongst people who were like them. Many real estate developers like William Levitt frequently marketed the fact that their suburbs were exclusively white in order to attract people. In 1957, the Myers, a black family, attempted to buy a home in Levittown, Pennsylvania. After being rejected by Levitt, the Myers bought a home in Levittown being sold by a couple who did not mind selling the home to a black family. Many of the locals were outraged, and members of the Myers family were constantly attacked and harassed. Despite this, they stayed in their home, which is why Daisy Myers is frequently called the Rosa Parks of the North.
In August 1957, Levittown, Pennsylvania attracted international attention when violence erupted as William Myers, Jr. and his family moved into the three-bedroom house at Daffodil and Deep Green Lanes. In almost all respects, the Myers family is close to the Levittown norm. They have 3 small children, the youngest only 1 month old. Myers served for 2.5 years in the Army and was discharged as a staff sergeant. He works as a laboratory technician and is studying for a degree as an electrical engineer. His wife, Daisy, is a college graduate. They are very close to the Levittown norm, except in one respect. William Myers, Jr. and his family are Negroes in an all-white community. Some view the incident calmly and indicate acceptance of the fact. But for others, the Myers moving into Levittown constitutes an infringement of their own liberties.
And we understood that it was going to be all white, and we were very happy to buy a home here.
Do you think a Negro family moving here will affect the community as a whole?
Definitely.
In what way?
I think that, well, the property values will immediately go down if they are allowed to move in here in any number.
The racial divide in American urban areas still exists, with minorities being vastly underrepresented in most suburbs across the country. The changes in American urban planning during the second half of the 20th century were not conventional compared to the rest of the world. Suburbs greatly changed how we live. Even though American-style suburbs are a relatively new concept, over 50% of Americans currently live in areas that are considered suburban. Suburbs changed our environment. They were and still are used as political tools. However, they have also greatly changed the social fabric of this country. Whole generations grew up without being able to do much independently while they were kids, since a car is required to go anywhere outside of a residential area in most cases. Many suburbs in America don't even have sidewalks. As a result of car-centric development, Americans also do not interact with people in their area frequently since they rarely see them just walking. As someone who is not from the United States and has lived in multiple places, I can tell you from my own experience that American urban planning has created a distinct way of life. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, that's a different question. However, I know for a fact that it was a significant frontier.